Thank you for joining XR Home, India's first AR/VR focused podcast. I'm your host, Eddie Avil, and today I'm delighted and honored to have with me Mr. Mao Lin Liao, who's an award-winning 3D character artist, entrepreneur in AI, holography, and digital humans. He's the founder of Mascot AI, Replica, and now Holo. He's redefining interactive technology. His latest creation, the Holo 1 3D holographic display, is already making waves, powering innovative multilingual visitor experiences for the Abu Dhabi police. So, Mao, really appreciate you taking time being part of the podcast. You've been in an interesting journey. You started as a 3D artist, character artist, but yeah, will be great if you could talk about your journey and how 3D modeling, 3D character artist sculpting has evolved over the years, specifically, with AI kind of like seeping in and generative AI specifically with doing it text to image, text to 3D, text to video. Would love to hear your take on it, the trends, the pros and cons of the.
I think I should take back 30 years ago. I'm about my history and so give the audience a bit background. So Mao, I actually was born in China, and I moved to the Netherlands in 1987, and I always thought the Netherlands was the land of cowboy, the wild wild west, because that's what China show us on television. It's just Western. That was the only things. So I have a certain imagination, and when I arrived in Netherlands, that wasn't the case, and I was very disappointed, and to process that, I always start to do sketching. So I start to drawing from very young age, and I've been starting like manga and then making more realistic portraits. So I have a lot of affinition with faces already, but I didn't know what I can turn that into my job. But slowly I discovered 3D thanks to a movie called Jurassic Park. I think everyone knows that movie, and I don't need to tell how 3D dinosaur turned me into a 3D artist. Maybe more people can relate to this. But then from there, I start working in the industry like a 3D artist, working mostly in the gaming industry. One of the maybe famous titles is Killzone for PlayStation 3, and I work also on Killzone, the PlayStation 4. But then I get bored with just making games, so I started also working in the movies. So I had a chance to work with Jackie Chan in the past, and
wow, how cool is that?
Well, I even got a chance to meet him in real life. So I always can show that off in to my friends, like, here, I met the guy. So that was my whole journey. And then at a certain point, you reach a time in your life, you're thinking, okay, what can I do more? I work in big studios, I work on big projects, I become freelancer, work for different companies. I feel like I hit the ceiling of what I can do. And then one day there was a project I did as a freelancer for a NGO, and that project called Sweetie. I don't know if you heard of it. So Sweetie was a project initiated by an NGO called Terre Homes. It's maybe it's Dutch, I don't know. But they try to create awareness around webcam sex child tourism. So people in the West actually talking to young girls in the Philippines. So to create awareness about this problem, they create a AI chatbot. But back in 10 years ago, there was no AI. So everything was actually real human operators. But I have to create the face for the child. And first I was questioning, like, why should we do this? But later I understand the cause, the reason, and then I start to collaborate. But what this project really showed me, that you can actually change people's life with what we are doing, with 3D. That is something I never thought was possible. So from that moment, I think, okay, maybe I should do more than just making beautiful graphics in my life. I should do something that maybe change people's life in future. So that's the start of Reblika. And Reblika, we are starting as a 3D character company, mostly creating hyper-realistic human. And that time it was before the Metaverse was hype. So there was a lot of hype around virtual influencers. Think about Little Michaela, think about Shudu and other fashion models that are taking over the world on Instagram. But those are like traditional 3D rendering and photoshopping, and there's no AI involved. So the Reblika was more like as a service company helping other people. But then I also start to see really the AI coming up, back in even 2019, I started thinking, is this something I can do for the coming 10 years? Probably not. So I start to see the AI model coming up, but I know it's not there yet. But I was like, maybe I should do more, either beat them or join them. But since we know what happened in a couple of last few years with AI, I think it's better to use AI as a tool and try not to compete or whatever. I think it makes no sense.
Yeah. So I think we're sitting in such an interesting point of time. I think the world paints a picture of like almost like us versus them. I think it's us together, because AI is a tool that's created by us. Yes, maybe it's getting more and more potent and maybe it might go out of hand. The reason is largely because I guess the AI that we have today is built on our data. And we humans are inherently biased. We've got all of these flaws which we've passed on, or training data we've passed on to the AI. And the only reason I see is maybe AI getting out of hand is two, because of those biased data, B, because of maybe the AI arms race of sorts, where these big organizations, these centralized organizations or nations are actually in a game, a race of sorts, where they're just trying to maybe build a technology, a powerful tool which might just give them like a undue advantage over the other. I think maybe that seems to be the end goal, rather than creating a tool which could be beneficial for everyone. And I think maybe it's this mind shift that needs to happen, where we need to think about like the larger good of humanity. And that doesn't happen because we live in a capitalistic world, and how that function is like, everybody is to each to its self, and we are all running crazily behind, like maybe thinking that, okay, we're going to become like a billionaire. And, if you kind of probe and ask them like, okay, you want to become a millionaire or a billionaire? What do you want to do with the money? I think there's no like definitive answer, rather than just maybe I'll buy a big house, big car, holiday. There's no definitive answer, I think. And maybe that's the problem. I think the world needs to change, that we live in a beautiful planet, and what happens in one corner of the world impacts everyone. And I think all the tools we sitting in such a beautiful point of time, that the tools that we're building eventually could be sort of maybe branch out as a separate species, as completely. And that in terms, maybe it's good also, because think about like maybe like a parent child relationship, where when we give birth, I mean, the child takes its own path and own life. And I guess the same should happen. Yeah, the only thing is it shouldn't like destroy the world. But I think, yes, we're sitting in a fantastic point of time, and I think these tools are just going to augment us. Obviously, there's this conversation of like this AI is going to come, automation is going to happen, which we are seeing. And so maybe it'd be great if you could address that AI automation part, and 3D artists, specifically how it's going to impact them in the field of like, because I think each and every field is now getting a little scared, whether it's the films, whether it's the games, they're all taking a step back, because, even right now, these tools are still not completely photorealistic. We have MetaHuman and things like that, but still doesn't copy the nuances of what like a human does. So maybe you could address this evolution sort of 3D character or environment building, and maybe you can address the AI automation. What should one do?
Yeah, my take on AI and automation is, I think AI is just like a tool, like a knife. A knife, you can use it to kill someone, but you can also use it as a tool, and up to the user to decide if you want to use it for bad or use it for good. So I don't think the tool is bad, but it's just that how people use it determine the destination. That's one thing. The other thing is the whole fear around AI. The same thing happened to when 2D animators in the back-end business, when CGI was starting to come and Pixar animator has to reteach themselves from 2D animation to 3D. That was also like, oh no, we're going to lose our job. What happens? In that regard, I think there's something, I found a podcast that really, I don't know who that was. It was something about branding. But I really like about what he's saying. He asked me, what do you know who invent the fridge, the refrigerator? No one knows, right? So, but everyone knows Coca-Cola. But without the fridge, there was no Coca-Cola. So you can see the fridge is like AI. It's an invention. It's a tool. that allow all people to create the branding and the storytelling. But why is Coca-Cola well known? Because it's the story they tell around. Maybe it's the Christmas atmosphere, the red hue that keep prints in our mind. That will outlive any generation. But because if we focus too much on the tool, like we're now back in old time, learning Maya, learning 3D software, took us a lot of time. So that's why we are really afraid to lose that investment that we put in there and then say, okay, whatever you learn there is not necessary. Of course, that hurts us and our ego a lot if everyone can do it, and it takes also away the value. But I try to program my brain to more look at the concept, more look at the idea about storytelling than about what tool to use, because that will outlive any tools. I think that's how we should. That's my view on AI and how we should facing that in tomorrow.
That's such a beautiful take, Mao, because I guess the world is becoming more and more beautiful. Because for the first time in human history, like you rightfully pointed out, earlier the thing was you had to invest a certain point of time into any vertical that you want to become an expert in. But if you're a 3D artist, you do the entire a couple of years where you learn basic sketching, then you pick up like a 3D engine, whether it's Maya or any of the 3D engines, you sculpt a model, and it was a complete process, maybe that you spend in a bunch of years, skilling up in that field. But today, what has happened that it's the whole scene is democratized. Today, I mean, everybody is in the game. You don't know 3D modeling. You don't know design, you don't know game building. There is something which is like your friend, your partner of sorts, which is these generative AI models. And the best part is that you communicate it or design what you want to see, your invention which is there in your head, your piece of art which is sitting there in your head, you can bring it to life just by conversing with this model. And I guess Kiichi Matsuda had created this beautiful video about AI agents. How the future where we'll have these multiple AI agents and where you will kind of interact with them with your natural language, and they will create out these whatever you want. I'm sure in the future we'll have these multiple AI agents. It won't have a single agent. And I think this, like you pointed out, I mean, the future is getting more and more democratized. Yes, there are these pros and cons, but I think being a lifelong learner in this world is so very, very crucial, because yes, what you knew maybe in the next few years is not going to be relevant, but that's okay. If only and only you've got the desire to learn, then you will be able to learn that the new stack and create the future. And I think, like you rightfully pointed out, I think what needs to happen is, I mean, it's there in your head, and if there's a tool which is able to kind of enable it to put that in the canvas, I mean, how cool is that? And I think AI is doing that. Metaverse, I mean, metaverse as a term, like I said, I mean, it was an hype cycle when Meta kind of, changed the name from Facebook to, and all was cool. But then, it's now like spiraled down. Nobody even wants to take the term metaverse. Will you be able to maybe describe what or define metaverse? And what do you think is the hindrance which is stopping from it being mass adopted?
Yeah. Very good question. We also think about the metaverse, but we just don't call it metaverse. We just call it a game or experience. I think just like in the crypto, when the metaverse was a thing, people talk too much about the technical term like NFT and blockchain. But I really like what Reddit, the website Reddit did. They actually give everyone a wallet, but don't tell anyone that they have a wallet. So I like the technology is invisible because the end users don't care about how you call it as long as it's fun. So we should not sell it because it's a certain technology. And I think the same with AI or sorry, now go back to metaverse. You should not say it's metaverse and then assume that people will come to you because you use that hype word. So you have to. So what I'm right now building is something that take the people in a journey. I always imagine like how cool would it be if I can see myself in a game. I want to be in FIFA. I want to be in Call of Duty with my face. But I also want to take the same character to a different franchise, which is unseen, impossible right now because of IP, copyright, or whatever issue. So I think we need to establish something called a digital identity. But before people can go to this experience, whatever, they need to know what can they do with this avatar, right? So you have this chicken and egg problem. You need to create the world so people can onboard. but otherwise there's nothing to do with your avatar. And that's what I've been thinking so long about. How should the metaverse to be? So first, it should serve a big audience. The consumer should benefit by having a free avatar. They can do whatever they want, and they control the right and the portrait right and how they're gonna end up, and be able to use it to log into games that are. But on the other side, why should studio allow you to use your avatar, right? So you need to give them something back. So I think no one has done that before. But if you imagine, if you have built a community of maybe let's say 100,000 users that having their own avatar, and now one day I'll go to Sony. Hey Sony, I have 100,000 people want to play your game. Do you think Sony will say no? They will say yes, right? So that's what you need to do. You need to build a platform where you have a lot of people have something to share, like common ground, like just like a kind of like a Reddit community where they can talk, but also always can come back and change the avatar and share that with people, and then slowly promise them that we will make a game. Maybe this game could be community design. It doesn't have to be me. Why should I say, hey, you guys should play this my new sim game? Because no one's waiting for that. But what we should do is making a community-based game that's allow the community to vote for what type of game. Is it an RPG? Is it a first-person shooter? And then let the crowd design the world around it. And I think that doesn't happen. That doesn't exist yet. A world where I can freely do. And that's the reason why also Minecraft and Roblox is so popular, because they have this sandboxing environment. And for me, that is already the metaverse.
So how do you see this, like, I mean, digital identity evolving, because there is Ready Player One, RP, a 3D avatar engine. How do you see this future evolving? Because yes, I guess we are in the next few years. I think these virtual worlds are going to get more and more relevant, because even here in India, we have these virtual schools. So in fact, my son happens to be in a virtual school. Post-COVID, they started this virtual school, and then around 2024, they said, "Oh wow, this is so very cool," and they want to convert the same thing into like a metaverse first school. They're creating the infra around it. So I believe that in the next maybe few years, I think there will be more and more like maybe institutions turning to metaverse, to virtual worlds per se. The reason, because I think today, everybody's carbon footprint is a problem. You step out of the house, especially if you're living in a city. There's a huge carbon footprint, because like earlier also, when my son, even I work completely remotely, wifey works from home, so it's a complete home model. But that not many people have the privilege. Specifically, when you're in a city, the cities are getting more and more chaotic. The traffic is getting more and more unbearable. You get up in the morning, and there's a transit which is from home to work is maybe an hour, whether you're taking a metro or a car, and then the office is like you spend a couple of hours. It's very stressful, and then you come back home. There's a lot of carbon footprint. So what I'm trying to say is that maybe in the next few years, more and more people are going to realize that we're living in a world where climate crisis is a problem. We are creating this greenhouse emission, which is depleting our ozone layer. And I'm sure earlier was because of COVID, we kind of moved to the virtual world. But I think in the next few years, because of our overconsumption, we are consuming without conservation. We are going towards a world which is going to be more problematic. Global warming is going to be more serious. In that world, I feel that like the next few years, I think there's going to be hospitals which is going to be virtual, education which is going to be virtual, offices which is going to be virtual. In that world, where I think these AI converges with metaverse, obviously I think we're going to have our own avatars. How is digital identity going to be played out in that world? Yeah, it will be great if you could talk about that.
I have to say the pandemic is turned out really well for me. I enjoyed it a lot, because first there was the air was clean. There's not much people going outside, and I pick up a lot of habits like running and doing gardening. So I become a healthier person. I was less stressful, and then the team was also working remotely. And since we already started working remotely from 2019, there's no big change for us. And so we start remote, and then we go to an office, and then we go back to remote. So now it's permanent remote. And I'm more than happy to say that indeed we save us a lot of gas and CO2. So for me, that turned out really well. But what I kind of like start to also see another trend, that people start to be more aware of the mental health. I think it's an issue. Of course, you heard these days people are because so focused on the phone and on social media that they're not really interacting with each other. So at the same time, you want to create a virtual world, but you don't want people to be so addicted that they are not paying attention to the partner. So how can you incentivize people to go outside at the same time use your virtual world? That's very contradiction, right? So I've been thinking about this, and I'm just brainstorming right now. I could imagine that the only reason why I want to have an avatar or in the metaverse is if I have an alter ego like me uploaded to the cloud, and that alter ego start to make money for me. So because maybe whatever I program him as an AI, he climbed up in the social ladder. So you have like a leaderboard, and then maybe if I end up because of whatever I've been doing here by programming, maybe he's doing something good, and then he becomes like influencer, a person that I cannot be in this real world. And I can imagine because of that popularity, just like YouTube and influencer create economy, I can imagine that virtual avatar could actually send real money to me, and I actually can live from that by doing things that I cannot do in real world. That is something I've been fantasizing for a long time. I don't know how that can be realized, but I just want to share that with you.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting vision, Mao, because I think with these agentic AI, I'm sure we'll get into a world where we'll have these virtual influencers, and maybe these avatars will do the work for you, and possibly there will be some way that maybe you're also earning money. And you mentioned about this digital overload. Yes, I think that's a serious problem, because today's world, we are, at least the next gen seems to be addicted. But I guess, that's also depends upon person to person, because I think for me, I've always seen life as a balance, because I think if you tilt to the extreme left or the extreme right, it's always a problem. So I think knowing that, okay, there is a certain amount of digital element is very, very good in your life, but it's never going to replace the physical world. You need the sun, the garden, the beach, the mountains, and the physical interactions. So I think understanding the balance really depends upon the person, because I think a lot of people I get a little carried away, because we live in a hyper-connected world, and we've got all of these social media where we've got like maybe hundreds and thousands of friends. But sadly, if you see, even the physical world, they don't have any friends. So I think, stepping out, making that effort of making friends, going out, I think that's so very important, and maintaining balance. So I've always been a person where I feel that, you should never tilt on to the left or the right completely. That the middle ground is always the best path. Now you built something called as Holo One, which is these Holo box. Will be great if you could talk about that, because I think it all started with David Nussbaum. It started with Proto Hologram. Then there's other companies like Holo Connects, who have these Holo box. Will be great if you could, maybe talk about Holo box, this Holo One that you've built. What inspired you to build Holo One, and what sets it apart from your competitors?
So it's actually very low-hanging fruit for us, since we're already building avatars, like kind of like MetaHuman. To build to make a chatbot is actually no-brainer for us. Take an LLM, take the TTS or ASR, mix it together, then you get something. The first iteration, it was really bad. 12 seconds of delay before you get an answer. Everything looks awful. But we didn't give up, and we keep polishing code. And actually, this has been 2 years we're building on this. And the first version, it was all using, we call it APIs. And this means using different internet connections to make the lips move, use the brain from ChatGPT or other service. But then we start to talk to customer, and they say, hey, we love this, but we don't want to be dependent on big tech. Let's say Trump decide to cut the big tech like Google service or other service from Europe. In my case, I'm in Europe. That would be a huge problem, right? And that made me think, okay, how can we make a chatbot that doesn't rely on internet, can be completely localized, and you don't need a big server? So instead of focusing on the aesthetics of the avatar, which 99% of all the companies are doing, which is fine. I think there's room for all kind of avatar, realistic or non-realistic. And I think everyone has their own approach. But in a sense, we try to solve a problem, which is the security and also the rising cost of APIs. Because if you do the math, if you maybe use the software, but you have to pay every month like a couple of hundreds or thousands, just over time, it's more than what you, just like if you buy a car in installment, you actually pay more. And the second thing is when you demonstrate your assistant or whatever, there's always a problem with internet. Always. You can't get enough internet. It's always an issue. So the experience will be really laggy and it's not that great. So what we have built is we take all the problems and make the world's first Holo software that is deployed on one single PC. So you don't need an additional server. It's all running locally on your own computer. Plus we have the avatar and the lip sync in one package. I think that is what is different from our solution from the competition, because we think about the future of the client and saving the money.
Now, can you elaborate on this? Are you doing just the 3D part on it, or are you also manufacturing the Holo box? And it will be great if you could share the story behind the Abu Dhabi police deployment.
So the box is, I'm not specialized in hardware, but I have a very good friend in China. And China is basically the manufacturer of the world, right? And I think maybe all the boxes probably come from China, and it's just a matter of assembly. So I think you were foolish to think that everything is made in West, just like the iPhone, So it's just sourcing it smartly. But I think we do put a special touch by reassembling the perfect hardware. Of course, we do pick the right hardware that match with our software to guarantee the great performance. About the Abu Dhabi police project, of course, we actually have another project prior to that. We was helping a company in Riyadh called I forgot the name, but it's a healthcare company, and healthcare is big doing the annual Mecca, So we actually built a healthcare chatbot for them to acquire information about the health of all the visitors. It's a very complicated system. I cannot give too much away, but that was our first project in the Middle East. But soon from there, we start to pick up a lot of people pick up the project and start to approach us. So we build the next generation. And now, before it was more like a project base, but now we think it's ready to be deployed. And now we turn it into a product called Holo One.
Will be great if you could maybe talk about maybe what's the price point. If somebody wants to kind of get in touch with you, how do they get in touch with you if you're deploying this? What's the price point, and what maybe other use cases that you see? You mentioned about the healthcare space. Do you see this being deployed in other areas besides healthcare?
Yeah, definitely. I think the hospitality is not for the reason what you think. So hospitality, think about hotel reception, not to allow customers to check in. It's usually when you actually, but the problem with the hotel is that they have every day people coming from all around the world. And in the Netherlands, we have something called the city tax. And imagine you have to explain the city tax in 12 different languages. That would be hard for one person, right? So actually, most use case for this assistant is to really translate the translation, to explain. And now to upsell. But another thing is that, of course, reception is also something I used to work in a co-working space, and there's always a receptionist, but it's basically sitting there the whole day doing nothing, maybe some administrative. But how nice would be that there's a avatar that can be, basically can take over that job, because it's a very boring job anyway. So these are the things that I think people want to kill anyway. But on top of that, it saves also the hotel and the other costs if you have a permanent installation like this. About the price, we only it's very hard to give you one price, because it's depend on, we have different sizes for the box, ranging from maybe 1,500 just a small box to maybe a couple of thousand for a big box. But that we usually don't give on public, so it's something you have to acquire.
Perfect. I'll leave down your contacts, so maybe people, if they're interested, can get in touch with you directly. Mao, tell me, Now, do you do only these digital avatars in this holographic box, or do you also do humans, real humans? For example, maybe there is I'm unable to go to a conference, and do you do that? And if you do that, what would be the scanning technology? How do you capture the humans so that it gets projected onto this holographic box?
So it's what you're talking about. It's kind of like a video conference, like basically do a Zoom call, but then full body and 4K. So you require two setup. One is you need a 4K camera on one side, and the other first should also have another 4K setup showing the whole body. And then you get filmed and see each other. So in the marketing term, it looks really great, but I don't see it so practical. The only thing I think, which I think I was really blown away, is what Google recently announced.
Right.
So that is for me really, yeah. I mean, but that costs like maybe 100K or at least just for the hardware. You also need to take a subscription and thing like that. So that's not really for the mass. But I do think we can create the how you say, the impression of depth by using simple tech. For example, there's a webcam built in every one, right? So in every laptop. Why don't we use the webcam to track the head? So by knowing where the audience look at the head, I can create parallax for you, especially if I had 3D model of your face. So I've been thinking more like to use this kind of low tech to make the impression of, while Google has some very impressive hardware and it doesn't require like maybe they use camera track. I don't know what exactly the tech is, but it gives you the impression that you're looking at someone with.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. For somebody who's been, you like started as, a 3D character artist, and you've done like a lot of scanning of humans also. I mean, how is this scanning technology evolving? Because you pointed out this one, people using just 4K cams, and then they're using depth cameras. There is also photogrammetry. There's also volumetric capture, and then there is this the other new technology with AI, where these nerves and 3D Gaussian splats. How do you see this evolving? What are the other maybe tech stack which could possibly maybe shorten the horizon and bring this technology that we're talking about, like maybe like a full holographic avatar which we could stream?
I think the most impressive thing that we've seen these days is the one from Google. I think Apple Vision Pro. They have an update on the avatar system, and now it looks much better and more expressive. And I think most of those systems are based on trading as well. So I think you start with a 3D scan of yourself, and then of course they have their own data set that knows how. There's something called facial action coding system, FACS. That basically is a database of all the emotion of your face, and there's maybe. I'll say it's kind of similar to what Apple has, this AR kit that is 52 blend shapes. Blend shape are expression, but I think Apple has probably a better tech to capture more nuance of the face, and then reapply that with the avatar that they capture you in 3D. And I think that's the future, because if you think about that, the only thing you have to capture is basically 0 and 1. And emotion. And if you have to capture your face and all the as video data, that's doable. That's what we're doing right now. But if you add 3 dimension, then you actually have to take a 3D model and project it somewhere, right? But still, that doesn't give you the hair and fidelity. So I think the future will be a combination of indeed Gaussian splat, but make it animatable. That solve the problem with the hair and also have the highest fidelity.
I think in the course of the conversation, we were mentioning about, like how we have these tools such as MetaHuman, where we helps us create these hyper realistic humans, but still these are still not those nuances. That when you see a MetaHuman, even now that it's not. I mean, maybe the face is cool, but maybe the rest of the body, that it's not real. What's the timelines that you see that maybe we will be able to come towards maybe avatars which is indistinguishable from the real life us?
Yeah, the problem with MetaHuman and anything that we create is that it needs manual labor to make it look good. Even if I take your model and I put in very bad light, people say, nah, that's ugly. But the same model lit in a professional way, just like being shot in a studio by a professional photographer, it looks day and night, right? The same face, day and night. The same apply with a digital human or characters. It depends on really how you frame it. make it look real or not. But then that's just the virtual side. And then you have the motion side. Usually we capture motion with 60 frames per second max, but mostly 30 or 24. So, but in real life, there's no frame rate. There's infinite frame rate. If I do this, there's millions in between steps, but in the computer only capture like this 4 frames. So of course, we cannot see beyond 24 frames per second, but that's why we see films 24 frames per second as a fluid motion. But actually, we do pick up the in between because there's something on the iPhone. I don't know, Android as well. You have something called ProMotion in iPhone that gives you higher frame rate, and actually you can see the difference. I think that's the disconnect. If we cannot take away the frame rate out of this equation, and we can record human at such high frame rate, I think that is where we start to see more believable human. But because of the internet, transportation, and this display, we all have to tone it down to 30, 60, and plus the compression. Of course, you're not going to believe this is a real human, right? It makes sense.
I was on your LinkedIn page, and I saw that you've been doing this wonderful initiative by paying it forward, where you do these free coaching classes of sorts to 3D artists and entrepreneurs. Like for the ones who are listening, he's an entrepreneur, 3D artist. Could you share some of those valuable insights, which could like really help, whether it's a 3D artist or just an entrepreneur who's starting his journey.
Yeah, I was starting to be interested in coaching because I also wish I had a coach when I start in the business. And actually, I listen to so many people, and every time, depending on who I listen, I turn left and turn right. I actually end up nowhere. And what I try to train people is to listen to their own voice. And that's very hard because we always listen to other people. We think we don't know. We don't trust our own instinct. We actually know what we should do. And by bringing up your own voice, and all you have to do is talk to a person. I found out that that's all I had to do. In my case, I was talking to my wife or talking to my friends or the co-founders in the space. That really helps me to, understand who I am as a person. That's actually the insight. People don't know what they want and where they are in this situation. And it is also not like one advice to fit them all. I'm not saying, hey, you have to wake up every day at 5 o'clock, go to the gym, do this, do that, then you become successful. No, it doesn't work like that. Everyone is different. And because everyone is different, you have to tailor this for the advice also to the person. But it's just like you have a child, right? So if you cannot send a child to the big world and say, hey, you go, take care of yourself, of course it will go wrong. But of course you can give some guidance and say, okay, if you do this, that's what might happen. If you do this, that might happen. But the rest, you have to take care of yourself because I cannot hold your hands forever. And that's how I see with coaching. I teach the basics of what I know by showing the mistake that I made. And there's tons of them. So maybe that's another podcast if you want to hear. But that's how I actually teach people how to overcome their problem. Yeah.
How awesome is that, that you are giving that time of yours? And I guess, rightfully pointed out, I think we are made out of mistakes. If you learn from it and grow from it, that makes you better. And I think that don't need to shy away from those falls. When you fall, I think those are the best times because, if you learn to pick yourself, then you can only move forward. My last question to you, Mao. You've been part of, like a couple of companies. You've been an entrepreneur. There's Mascot AI, there's Reblika, and there's now Holo One. What's the plan for the next 5 years for all of these companies? Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? And it'll be great if you could also maybe, it's speculation from our side, but it'll be great if you could also maybe, paint a picture or give some kind of insights of what do you see coming in the next 5 years, which could be valuable for, whether it's a 3D artist or whether it's an entrepreneur, anybody who wants to create a preferred future, those insights could be helpful. It would be great if you could, share that.
I see a huge group of people that will have no work. Let's say people like the artists or whatever, it's a growing group that's concerned about the future. And there's also another group in the world that is screaming for new original content. And what I'm talking about is the artist and the consumer. And I don't think there's anyone who actually brought them together. Meaning if I go to ArtStation, ArtStation? It's like a community for artists. Every time I see, I'm inspired. I want to try it out. But I realize that all of them are just static images. What if I can actually see what I see? I can take it and get inspired and turn that into a something. So what I've been working right now is find a way to build a community that allow creators, artists, to make money using the asset that they made, and basically, and at the same time build up a following. So you have to think about ArtStation combined with what's called Patreon. The Patreon is like a OnlyFans. People get paid because people follow them. But right now, there's not enough. But the followers, the problem right now is that the most followers are artists following other artists. Artists are already poor. They have no money. So that's not going to work. Eventually, that will dry out. But what we need is creators, but then also followers that are consumers. Because that they cannot create their own stuff. They have to follow this guy. Maybe he's a creator of a game. Or maybe, and I basically want to create something that allow consumer to follow artists and make them become a superstar one day. Using that to pay them a fair amount to basically turn that into a living and create art they want to create and not have to do production work. Because production is not going to be needed because there's AI, right? So that is something I found missing. And I really think that is what I'm going to focus on the next 5 years with Mascot, is building something like called a user-generated content, UGC platform for artists and consumer. Yeah.
Beautiful. Mao, it was truly a pleasure speaking to you, learning from you, your journey. And I think this vision of yours is so really cool. And I wish you the very best for it, because I guess, so far, I think artists have always been squeezed out or juiced out by these platforms, whether if you're a musician, you've been juiced out by these music labels. If you're a storyteller or a creator, you're juiced out by a production house. If you are an artist, you're juiced out by an agency, because there's always been this middleman, which has been the problem so far. Maybe there's not been an engagement directly with the consumer, and that's the problem, because there's always been like a middle person who's kind of juicing out and taking away all the maybe the real value which maybe the artist creates, and there is a consumer who willing to pay for it, but then because there's no platform, these people, the web 2.0 guys, they juice out. So I hope that this platform that you're talking about, this world that you're talking about, comes to fruition, because it'll solve so much of the problem. Because I think most of the platforms, it's centralized, and it's I mean, they are the ones who keeps all the value, and because of which I think the world is so plastic. Because what happens is the world thinks that maybe only a certain kind of music or art is something which is consumed, and so that's the reason you see only like a pop or like a plastic music or a certain kind of content, because the world thinks that, when there is so much of audience which is looking for maybe niche like art or music or content, and I think that will only happen when a platform is completely decentralized. And maybe with this world that we are getting into, where there is so much of AI which is creating all these synthetic content, I'm sure we'll come to a world where maybe the consumers are going to get very, very fried, because they'll be seeing everything is going to be flashy, because everything is going to be so great. And then maybe we'll look out or seek out for that human pieces which has got those flaws, but yet
you're right.
Has that beauty of it, so more power to you. And I hope that what you're visioning comes to fruition, and more power to what you're building with Reblika, Mascot, as well as Holo One. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, then please click the subscribe button, and until next time, see you guys. Bye bye. Thank you. Really appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you so much.